All right, we're going to give it a couple seconds to chug. All right, looks like we are live. Welcome, everybody. My name is Matthew, and I am a bookseller as well as an events operator here at the store. And I just want to go ahead and thank everybody for tuning in with us this evening as an independent bookseller, especially here in Uptown Minneapolis, Minnesota. We really can't do what we do here without your support. So even if you're just tuning in, even if for the first time ever, very special welcome to you and thank you for being part of our community. Here at Majors and Quinn, we are proud to be presenting author Laura Moher with her book, Curves for Days, in conversation with our very own Annie Metcalf. A couple of times throughout the night, I'm going to link information to the book in the comments, both on YouTube and on Facebook. And that includes if you should choose to order the book. And if you do, very special thank you for supporting us in that way as well. On top of that, please let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd like to know whereabouts in the country we're reaching folks. As well, we will be taking questions, comments, hopefully no concerns in the comments. Go ahead and leave those as they pop up. We'll just keep a record of them, and then we'll come back to them in the end. We'll have about 15, 20 minutes for that in the end. So, without further ado, Laura Moher is a former associate professor of sociology at the University of South Carolina, upstate in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Her head is full of stories of flawed people who come together to make each other and the world a better place. She has deep roots in the South, having grown up in the Louisville, Kentucky area before moving to the Western Carolinas, where she taught for 11 years. She has also lived in Colorado and Illinois and is now currently settled near her son in Minnesota. I'm going to go ahead and hand the event off. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Laura Moher.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. And first, we're going to hear a short passage from Curves for Days from Laura, and then I will be back in a moment to chat.
First, I want to say thank you to Annie and Matthew and Majors and Quinn for hosting this. It's an honor and a pleasure. This passage that I'm reading is from early in the story. The first couple of meetings of Rose and Angus did not go well. They did not hit it off. Angus was cranky anyway. He did not like Rose. The point at which I'm reading is from Angus's perspective, and they've begun to be a lot more civil to each other, but they wouldn't even call themselves friends yet. Okay. I'm just lifting the new toilet out of the van when I hear running footsteps, a cry, then a thud and a clatter, then crinkling plastic bags and a whack, whack, whack. I set the toilet down, none too gently, and run for the gate. 10 feet inside the backyard, there's a scrawny white dude on his belly on the ground, looking like a turtle trying to draw his head into his body. Got his arms covering his skull. Scattered around him are sections of copper pipe and wire I should have stashed in the garage. Rose is circling him, cussing a blue streak, rooting in her purse as she moves, raising her shopping bags threateningly whenever the guy twitches. Angus, get your ass in here and kill this guy. What happened? Pretty sure she's more dangerous than he is, but just in case, I stepped between them. The gate wasn't latched, and when I came in, he charged me. She's nearly squeaking. He almost impaled me on one of those pipes. I wasn't charging you. I was trying to leave. The guy shows his face for an instant. With our copper. Rose is the picture of outrage, her curls standing on end, her scowl ferocious. She pulls out her phone and dials 911, asks them to send officers, keeps pacing, more agitated than I've ever seen her. I reach out one arm and reel her in, tuck her into my side, ignoring both the buzz that starts under my skin and the startled look she shoots me. She's trembling from fear or excitement or rage. I can't tell which. I pull her a little closer, watching the guy on the ground and trying not to laugh. Turn loose that copper and just lie there, buddy. Not sure I can stop her if she wants to hit you again. I refocus on Rose's tense face and speak slow and easy, hoping to loosen her up. So you want me to kill him, huh? She sighs and relaxes against me, all warm and soft and orange scented, still shaking. No, she adjusts her purse strap on her shoulder. I don't think he was really trying to hurt me. I think he was probably only trying to get out the gate with the stuff. The guy on the ground holds his hands up in a "see, I told you so" gesture, and I get a better look at his face. Jerry? What the hell, man? Goddamn Turtle Man is Jerry Hawes, 2 years behind me in school. He sighs, stares at the dirt for a minute before meeting my eye. Hey, Angus. Sorry, man. He shifts his gaze to Rose. Sorry, man. Been a really bad day and I made a really bad decision. I'm so sorry I scared you. Rose has gone still at my side, looking from me to Jerry. I give her another little squeeze, not because it feels so good, but just to reassure her. Sit up, Jerry. Just don't make me chase you. I'm bigger than he is, but I'm just as fast, and today he looks too hungry to outrun anybody. He pushes himself to a sitting position, brushing grass and dirt from his face and clothes. What the hell were you thinking, Jerry? He shakes his head. Not enough, obviously. He nods toward the alley. I was taking a shortcut home, walked downtown for a job interview this morning. We really needed me to get that job, and the truck's not running. But after me and some other guys had been waiting a couple of hours, somebody came out of the office and said they'd hired as many as they needed. He shakes his head again. I'd been planning to pick up a steak or something on the way home if I'd gotten the job. Get Lydia some red meat, help build her up some. But they sent us home. So I was walking slow, wondering what to tell her so she won't worry. And I saw this gate sagging open. God knows he heard somebody bought the place, wanted to see what they'd done with it. Peeked in, saw the copper, tried to tell myself nobody'd missed the leftover bits and pieces. He rolls his eyes, looking disgusted with himself. Stupid, 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 stupid. Lydia not doing so well. I'd heard his wife had cancer, sweet woman, first grade teacher. Everybody loves her. This'll kill her if the cancer doesn't. Jerry clears his throat. She made it through the surgery okay, but the chemo and radiation are kicking her butt. She's so tired, so thin, scares me to look at her sometimes, Angus. Money tight, huh? I don't like asking him in front of Rose, but she shows no sign of going anywhere. Jerry nods. Family leave ran out a couple of weeks ago. Lydia was too sick for me to leave her alone. My boss held my job open as long as he could, but finally had to hire somebody. He laughs, but there's no humor in it. Lydia wants to go back to work. Misses the kids something terrible, but no way right now. She wouldn't even be able to handle half days till we get her built back up some. What kind of work do you do? Rose's voice is quiet. He meets her eye. Been a delivery driver for the past 12 years, ma'am. Do some odd jobs here and there since Lydia's been sick, stuff that don't take me away from her long. The police pull up in the alley before Rose can ask any more questions. She's up and away from me in a flash. I'm feeling disgusted at myself for missing the warmth of her when I hear her say, I'm so sorry, officers. I should have checked with Angus here before I called you. I didn't know Jerry was doing him a favor. Well, I'll be goddamned. They turn to me. Angus, y'all good here? That wacky pain in the ass woman. That kind-hearted, wacky pain in the ass woman. Yeah, sorry, guys. Miscommunication. My bad.
Thank you, Laura. That was great. Yeah, I was like writing all these things down. I have so many things to ask you. So pleased to talk to you about this really fun romance. So since you started with that passage, why don't we talk a little bit about one of the themes in this book that is not always super present in romance, particularly contemporary romance, is class and poverty, money. we just met some characters who are having really acute money troubles, and then as people read the book, they will see that both Rose and Angus have their own sort of complicated relationship with wealth and all of that. So what made you put this in the book? What made you think about that as something you wanted part of the plot?
It came from several places, I guess. This was my first published novel, but I had actually written a manuscript with two of the side characters in this story as the main characters. And for the end of their story, I needed a character to come to town by herself and be really, really wealthy and not know what to do with her money. So I had to ask myself a bunch of questions, who would do that? Who would come to town and be all alone and be rich and not know what to do with that money? It just seemed pretty implausible. But Rose just kind of was the answer to those questions. She just took root in my mind as somebody who had lived a life where she knew what it was like to barely be scraping by, and to see people suffer when they didn't quite have enough. And she also, and I think this comes through in the story, but she also had enough of a challenge supporting herself that she never built up a big wish list of, how we all have these conversations about what would you do if you won the lottery. She didn't have dreams that big because she really had no hope of that ever happening, and she couldn't afford a lottery ticket. So for her, she gets all this money and really doesn't have a bucket list that she wants to tick off things she wants to buy, or really expensive things she wants to do. But everywhere around her, she sees people still struggling the way she and her mom had to. And so that's when the idea begins to take shape for her. This is what I'm going to do with this money.
Yeah, well, I thought it tied in surprisingly well with, romance novels are wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
For a lot of readers, whether we are looking at the heroes or some other aspect of it, that's just like, and for me, it was also just lovely to see like the right person have this money.
Yeah.
I mean, he says it in the passage you read, she's a very kind person, and so is he. And it's, everyone has their little wish list, and we all maybe want more things than Rose would, but we also still, many readers, I think, would like to think of themselves as like, there's so many problems we could fix,
Yeah.
And that was like that's such an intoxicating part of this book. When you're like, yes, this fixes problem. So that's such an interesting, I just love that. And it also, I think, I don't want to stay on this one topic for too long, but for the romance readers who are watching, I don't think that this is a spoiler. They will get together. They will be together. Spoiler alert, happy ever after. But also a very important part of the happy ever after is that right before it comes, the 11th hour breakup, something will happen that will, at the very almost the end, is the challenge they have to overcome. And I thought that was very well handled as well. They're very specific. They're very character specific. It's not like broad brushstrokes at all. It's how exactly these characters you've created would deal with this exact situation. The money issue causes these specific characters to have, there's like trust and fear on one side, and there's feelings of inadequacy and like needing to be, it's just like, it's so, the plot you have created is so specifically crafted to these characters that it is, though those breakup moments are always frustrating because the reader often is like, just say this, I will do this for you. There has to be some realism to it, you've come to know this person and you're like, you know what, they would react like this. And it was just very well handled. And I think I haven't seen much in terms of like money or this type of thing being so the emotional reality of like money trouble being like very well integrated. Let's also, so we talked a little about that. You just touched on it, which is such a fun detail that Rose grew out of necessity for another plot, another book you were working on. Maybe we'll get to see that someday, because I'm sure if people read this book, they will be excited to return to maybe some characters they will have met. But what else can you tell us about the book's origin story? Like when, where, how, why did you conceive of and write it? And then how did you get it out into the world?
Okay, well, at the same time that I was asking myself, who is this person who comes to town with money, after I had written that other story, I was also thinking about my son who had gone away to college, and I had terrible emptiness syndrome. I mean, I was crushed, and I was looking around the house and I was thinking, I have 3 bedrooms. I sleep in 1 bedroom. I have 2 bathrooms. I can't use them both at once. I have this 8-foot strip of almost every room I went into in the house that was completely unnecessary. And I felt like I was rattling around, and I had this yard to take care of, and it was too much. It was more than I needed and more than I wanted. And my son had loved that house, and we had been very happy together. But he fell in love with the Twin Cities, and he wasn't ever going to move back there. There was no point me paying for that house and keeping it up to leave to him, because he would just want to sell it. So I thought, why am I doing this? And at the same time, I had I was getting burned out at work. I actually wrote the first 2, this manuscript and the previous one, at the tail end of my sabbatical. And I wasn't anxious to go back to work. And I thought, this job is killing me, but I need the job because I have to pay for the house, but the house is too much. So what if, so I had all these ideas in my mind about what's enough and what's too much and what's not enough of something that's not related to money. And all of those things came together. And my working title for this story, actually, before I signed with Source Books and we found the real title for it, my working title in my head was Enough, because it summed up Angus's issues and Rose's issues and, frankly, my own issues.
Wow, that is amazing. That's such a very courageous and like cool set of moves there. And so yeah, once you had written it, before we went live, you mentioned that you are agented. So this is a traditionally published book, as we say. This Source Books is a publisher that works with authors agenting. It's not a self-publishing. So how did you become agented, and how did you then land at your publisher?
This is a story for me. It's a story of luck. I mean, I've been hugely lucky. And first, I would say the first part of it is I was born into a family that could afford books and could afford a good education. And I was born into a family that liked books. And so I have read and told myself stories for as long as I can remember. And I always thought of college as something I could do. And so I had this basis of a really good education, and it got me a decent job. And obviously, I could take a sabbatical, and so when I ended up with these manuscripts, and I thought, okay, at that point, I had like 3.5 manuscripts. And I knew nothing when I started writing them. Nothing. I knew nothing about the word count for specific genres. I knew nothing about the publishing world or its expectations. I didn't know about querying. I thought, oh, I'm embarrassed to say this. I thought an agent was somebody you called on the phone and asked to work for you. And my first story, the one that I wrote before this, was David and Meg's story. If you've read this one, you'll recognize them as secondary characters. When I wrote that, it turned out to be 116,000 words, and I hadn't divided it into chapters. So I had this lump of words, and I knew nothing. And I was gradually coming to realize that I knew nothing, and that, oh, wow, I needed a lot of work. And I started entering contests because I thought, okay, I'll get some, this is a good way to get feedback.
Yeah.
And I met some fabulous people doing that. And I ended up joining RWA a couple of years before they imploded. And, you know, most of us, or an awful lot of us, left them. And so somewhere in there, I met the most wonderful critique partner, and she's still, you know, my favorite of my readers, and we read all of each other's work. Her name is Mary Morris, and she knew that she writes as Phoebe Walker. She's half of Phoebe Walker, and she was so much more knowledgeable about the publishing world than I was. And when Romance Landia set up this auction, Romancing the Vote, to try to get the vote out in Georgia, Mary and I were both bidding on items, and Mary, okay, I can't remember the order in which this happened. Mary bid on a book by Suzanne Brockman, and I loved Suzanne Brockman's works, and there was something she had offered as part of a silent auction to raise money for that, in which she offered a manuscript critique. And I was convinced if I could get my manuscript in front of Suzanne Brockman, something good, vague, good thing will happen, you know. So I bid on that, and, you know, the bids took off. People were so generous, and it was such a good cause. And I was the bidding quickly outstripped my budget. And so I comforted myself. First I raised my budget, and then the bidding outstripped that too. And then and I told myself, okay, it's a good cause. Somebody else can afford to donate more to it than I can. I'll figure something else out. So I didn't get the Suzanne Brockman bid, but Mary won her Suzanne Brockman book that she had bid on. And when Suze contacted Mary after the auction was over and said, okay, who should I make this inscription out to? Mary said, you know what? My critique partner just got an agent for this wonderful book that she's written. Send it to her. She's a big fan of yours too.
Oh.
And Sue sent me the book and said on the inside of it, be sure to send me ARCs for your book when you get it. And so, like, I have been lucky every step of this way. Mary was the person who recommended that I critique my agent, Sarah Megabo, and Sarah loved the book. Sarah got it to Deb at Sourcebooks, Deb Worksman, and you know, my luck hinges on my parents and my friends, Mary and now Suze. And I just, you know, I've been lucky every step of the way. Well, I worked hard. I won't say I didn't work hard, but any one of those things had happened differently, you know, this story would be different.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, consensus in the comments is that you have great talent, also luck and talent. Also, hello to there is a Mary Morris and a Suzanne Brockman.
Yes, they are.
Those are the stars of that story. Thanks for joining us. Okay, well, that's just a little insight into where this book came from, and it's really exciting. The prospect of seeing more from you and from this group of characters. So let's go back to talking about your two main characters again, Rose and Angus. Wonderful couple. Let's talk about Rose. Rose is fat. How did you conceive of the character of Rose? Did you always know she was going to be a fat woman, or was that just something that came later? And talk a little about your experience as a romance reader with fat representation in romance, and why it was important to have her look a certain way. Also, the cover of this book is gorgeous.
Isn't it?
I have the arc, so it's just this, but you can sort of see the cover behind Laura's hair. She's got this awesome like purple lipstick. It's great. And you can head to our website where you can also purchase the book and take a closer look at the cover. So why don't we talk a little bit about Rose?
Rose was born fat in my mind. She's never not been fat. And it's part of her story, but not all of her story. It's certainly she was hugely shaped by bullying in high school. And the bullying was partly because of fatness, but partly not. But the bullying really shaped her into somebody who was, even though she wasn't a natural introvert, she kind of drew in and became very self-sufficient and very much of a loner out of self-protection. Mm. And so what I tried to do with her in the story was show some of the kinds of experiences that fat readers would understand and recognize, and that maybe readers who aren't fat might think, oh, I never thought about that. I guess that would be an issue. Mm-hmm. So things like when Rose goes back to school and she's worried ahead of time about the what style and size the desks will be. Mm-hmm. Will she be able to fit comfortably so that she can learn as easily as possible? Or is she going to be in such physical discomfort that that it'll impact her learning? Mm-hmm. And part of that, for me, when I was younger, I wasn't fat. And so through much of my schooling, I never had to think about desk size. But when I went back to grad school, some of my classes were in classrooms with those seats that had the attached desks. The desks are attached on one side. And unless I went to class and got there before everybody else so I could get this one desk that I could fit in comfortably, I knew I was going to be really physically uncomfortable that whole class period, and also embarrassed about it. Mm-hmm. Because, as a fat person, like I wasn't at the point where I was going to take any crap about my, if somebody had said, look at you, overflowing that desk, I wouldn't have taken that kind of crap. But at the same time, it's embarrassing because that the people who look at you aren't going to think, oh, that's terrible that they don't have suitable sized furniture for a variety of people. They're going to look at me and think there's something wrong with me, instead of recognizing that desk is the result of a decision somebody made, and they could very well have made a more compassionate decision, So I tried to show up some things like that. The booth size in the restaurant and the lack of ability to just know that you're going to be able to walk into a store and find clothing that fits you. I just tried to mention those things because I think those are some fairly common experiences for fat people, fat women especially. And those belong in a story about a fat person. It's not really portraying a fat life if you gloss over all the things that living in this country as a fat person really entails. And I didn't want to dwell on it or make, her be, crushed by it or anything. I just wanted a nod to the reality of it.
No, yeah, it really just comes through in sort of the texture of like the little details of her day. Like someone mentioned it, and it's something I thought of too. Like assuming the lingerie won't fit. Like she sees these beautiful items in the store and assumes they won't, and eventually is pleasantly surprised. Like there are a lot of things about the town Galway that you have created that pleasantly surprise Rose in this way, makes it feel good for her to be there. But there are also things that are, she is right about some things. Like there is a very interesting older woman who has some opinions about Rose. And I won't give away too much, but she's a really interesting character. And I hope we maybe see more of her a little bit. Yeah. She's something. But yeah, like it's not all like you've created this like sunshine fantasy land where Rose is crazy for having these experiences.
Right.
She knows exactly who she is and where she is. But yeah, she's, like you say, it's not her entire character, but it is something that has informed her life. And so similarly, let's talk about Angus a little. And I was curious. I mean, there's such depth of the detail to Angus as a veteran and his experience with mental health and other problems facing people leaving military service. Is that something that comes from something personal in your life, or did you do research, or where did Angus get this?
It's something that I've done a lot of reading about over the years. It's never been my area of expertise. I am by no means an expert. I'm not a veteran. I haven't worked directly with veterans. I did work with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And as I was undergoing the training for that and working with our clients, I learned enough about PTSD that the symptoms are really similar. Trauma symptoms they're a little different for everybody, but there's a lot of common ground between survivors of different kinds of trauma. So I was always interested in that. And then I was always kind of interested peripherally on women entering the military and passing those physical fitness tests and being accepted in. And I had read different things over the years about the military, and I started hearing a lot more about sexual assault in the military. And that's when I learned about the chain of command and how important prosecuting sexual assault in the military kind of depends on the links in the chain of command and the decisions that they make. And I was always interested. I know, people who were slightly older than me were Vietnam vets, and then people who were a little bit younger than me were gung-ho to go fight somewhere after 9/11, and so it seemed like there was always some kind of article for me to read in the news about new issues veterans were facing. And it always seemed to me to be kind of an issue of fairness. You're asking somebody to put their life between us and things that will kill us, and so it has always seemed outrageous to me that we're then so begrudging of benefits that seem obviously due to them. So yeah, I did do some research. I did some research into how easy it is to get medical or mental health care for veterans. And into whether there's a backlog for it and whether everybody qualifies. And I didn't even know, I had heard before, I had heard about, oh heck, what's it called when you leave the military? You can be discharged honorably or dishonorably, right? I had heard of those two, but there's at least one other category that I hadn't heard of, and not all the categories qualify for all the veterans benefits, and I didn't know that, and that seemed especially unfair to me because some of the same types of things that would cause people to get a less than honorable discharge are the same things that would disqualify them for the mental health care that might have caused them to be discharged less than honorably. So it just was, I don't know, it's something that I've always been interested in. And I've read some on, but I'm still not an expert. I hope I did it. I hope I portrayed it accurately. And if I didn't, I hope somebody will correct me because it's important. So.
Yeah, well, Angus comes across as very believable and representative, in line with other depictions we have seen of like veterans, PTSD, that kind of. But obviously, he's a little further along in his like healing journey, but still has issues, as every hero must, because we need to have that 11th hour catastrophe. Yeah. So, okay. I think we should get to questions in a couple minutes here, but I have two more questions for you. So those of you who have not already written a question, do it now. We're going to ask Laura a couple more questions and we'll get to the audience portion. What are some of your favorite romance tropes? Like, so we've done, I don't know, what do you would even call this? It's sort of, it's not enemy. It's like friends to lovers. They're friends, pretty.
Yeah.
They have a funky meeting, but then they kind of work it out, and then, yeah, I would say friends.
This is another thing I was ignorant about until the last couple of years. I was not aware that there were these tropes that people sought out books for. Like when I would pick up a book in the bookstore, I would read the back of it, and if I liked the way it sounded, I would get it. And as I look back on it, it was all different kinds of tropes, and I could read the book jacket and say, "Oh, this one sounds good," and then read a book jacket with the same tropes and not have any interest in that at all. So I think obviously, I use some tropes, but it's more coincidental or accidental than.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great because I also didn't really know the names of any of them until I started reading more romance, as we've worked with more romance authors over the years. So it's been really fun to learn, but it is like they get named after there's been enough of them. Like they're just good devices.
Yes.
That get used, and then, but some people do have like a real affinity for one or the other. Someone just in the comments here does call this a grumpy / sunshine. I do think that is true. Yes. Oh, Angus. Grumpy. Yeah. So I'll ask one more question and then we'll get to some of yours. So I am now sort of interested in maybe the editing of the book or the structure. So I'm always curious, as we do so many author events, I think one of the most interesting things is what has changed? Like what is different this way it is now than it was when you maybe first gave it to your editor? Is there anything different of like the order in which things happen, the structure, the way you wrote the different viewpoints? Because it alternates between Rose and Angus. Is there something you remember draft 1 to draft whatever changing a little bit?
Yes, there are some things that Deb asked me to change. And there was something that changed before Deb ever saw it. I had originally opened the story with Rose leaving Indianapolis and going to the beach. And I mentioned, in the finished version that we have now, we mentioned that she just came from the beach. But I don't mention much about her time there, except for when she spied the pregnant waitress and helped her out. But I mean, that was the first big scene. I showed that in real time in an earlier draft of the book, but it was cut before Deb ever saw it, because I needed like a more dramatic opening. So what Deb asked me to do, Angus, and I have to credit Deb for this because it was a move of genius, and I missed it. She brought this in. She said, I had Angus being 6'8" and just ripped. And I had Rose winning $500 million.
Tone it down.
That's kind of basically what her message was. Yeah. Well, how about 6'4"? Okay. And could he have a little meat to him? Readers are beginning to say that maybe they don't need to see every abdominal muscle.
I was going to say too, I mean, like, where's the next place we have to go in fat representation in romance? Is like, we got to get some in the mix. Not that we would describe Angus that way, but he's just a big guy.
Yeah.
Not like giant.
Yeah.
Big.
Just very imposing.
A normal sized big guy.
Yeah, just the kind of guy that would make Rose feel really safe and sheltered,
Yeah.
And not that she would have really admitted that she didn't, but
yeah.
But then the other thing that Deb did, and this is also actually something that one of my beta readers, Casey, had mentioned in passing, and I think this was genius too. My beta reader had said, I don't read a lot of romance usually, so I'm used to more world building. I would have liked to see more world building. And when Deb saw the first draft, Deb said, there are a lot of characters that make appearances and then disappear and are never seen evermore. Could we make some of them recurring? Yeah. And could we give more of the flavor of the town? And so when I sat down to edit, so she had given me some fairly big tasks, not so much about plot or character changes, right? Like the character changes were minor. But the world building was pretty big, and I had written, this is another thing I didn't know. Somebody else had told me this too, and I didn't know what they meant. They said, Laura, you've written in vignettes. These aren't full scenes or chapters. These are vignettes. And I said, oh, what's a vignette? So I had to figure out what that was. So I had to make full scenes and build the world and figure out how to make some of these characters help create that world, right? So I made myself this huge long list of things I needed to do. And I looked at it beside the list of the chapters and I thought, how can I kill two birds with one stone wherever possible? And so I made notes for myself. Okay, in this chapter, I need to change this, and that will do these three things. And I went through the whole rewrite like that. And it took a lot of thinking before I did any writing. But the Galway is a lot more interesting place because of Deb and my other beta reader.
Yeah, it's really amazing that was a piece of feedback you got, because
I'd see it
through. It's like, so actually, it's a perfect segue into one of the questions. So we'll move on to audience questions now. William asks, what was the experience like building a fictional town that will be the focal point of multiple works, multiple novels? So maybe when you were trying to take that advice and build up the town, the world building a little more, what was that like? What got you thinking?
Galway is kind of a composite of several towns in western North Carolina and the area of South Carolina that I lived in. And when my son was living in town with me, one of our favorite weekend things to do was drive to one of those little towns. You know, we'd find a place and we'd have lunch and we'd drive around. We did have an experience that we thought was pretty sure was going to end up with us hearing banjos and having to run. But these were the coolest little towns. They'd have these old buildings and art galleries, and they were just really interesting. And so Galway's kind of a composite of some of them and other places that I wish existed. So it was fun, and it was fun to be told to develop that more. And I pictured it in my head anyway. I have a map in my head, although I've never really drawn it out. I could tell you where everything is in relation to everything else, and so it's kind of fun. The characters were alive to me anyway, but now I have a place in which they live, which adds an extra layer of enjoyment for me.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's great. So I'm going to skip to next question. So Catherine asks, was it difficult to maintain the different voices this book is done in switching points of view, Rose and Angus? Was it difficult how did you make their voices different?
Rose and Angus weren't as difficult to keep different as other characters that I've written, because Angus was so grumpy at first, especially, and he was known to be, a man of very few words. So clip his sentences off. Don't ever have him.
I was going to say, he doesn't talk in full sentences. Like even like in the narration, not in the talk. It looks like it's very distinctive.
Yeah, he doesn't. He never says 10 syllables when 2 will do. So he was easy, and then Rose, and I've had a couple of people read Rose and another character I wrote for a different story and say, does that character have ADHD? Because they're just like my family member so-and-so who has ADHD, and that is exactly it. And every time I sit there and I think, not unless I do, because that's straight out of my that thought progression was straight out of my head. So Rose is kind of, she blurts stuff out. She's kind of filterless. Mm-hmm. So those two were easier to keep separate than most of the characters I've written.
Yeah, they're very different. Mm-hmm. Here's one from Reggie. How did you avoid common (parentheses annoying) cliches? More parentheses. Thank you for not overusing smirking. Did you fall into any cliches that your editor was able to catch, or did you avoid them all on your own?
Most of my problems they're often with punctuation. Like I either use no commas or I put them everywhere. And I'm pretty, by the time my editor has seen anything, I've been through it a million times. And I go through it reading it to myself silently, but I also will have Word read it to me through the immersive reader, and that's great for catching things that I wouldn't hear if I was just reading it silently to myself. I wouldn't necessarily notice the repetition of sounds if I had said the same word 3 times in a paragraph, as much as if I'm hearing it. I have certain pet peeves, certain words I hate. One of them starts with an M. It's just a disgusting word. Nobody needs to ever. I think we all hate this word.
It's not a popular one, no, I don't think.
No, but I don't like smirks, and I don't like winks much, and so I avoid the things that I have found annoying.
Yeah.
And I try to be conscious of whether I'm using a word too much. And there are still words that I know that I use too much. I used to use just way too much. So I've become sensitized to that. I'm sure there are still words that I probably irritate other people with. And I just haven't caught them yet, but I will, by golly.
You'll get there.
Slice them out of there.
Yeah, you'll get, this book will be a bestseller, and then you'll start getting mail. But you have to stop using words.
Yes.
Okay, here is a question from Pam. How hard was it to offer your manuscripts to friends or family for the first readings?
Oh my gosh, if this is the Pam that I think it was, she was my poor first victim. She saw the earliest version of my stories, and man, were they terrible at that point. So it was really hard because like you're handing a piece of yourself to somebody and asking them for feedback. You're opening yourself up and asking for critique, right? Basically. And I talked to somebody who'd been writing a lot longer than I had been. At one point I told her, this is really, really hard, especially the idea of me handing somebody a book with like sex scenes or really emotional scenes. Aren't they going to look at that and think, oh, that's all about her? And the other author said, people who read your books will understand that there are parts of you in that story, that, the bits of you will make it into, the scenes or the events or the reactions or whatever, but they won't know which bits. And that I found a lot of comfort in that, and knowing that really, really makes me care less. I mean, I still care. I want everybody to love everything I write, and I don't want them to think about how it connects to me, but they're going to, and sometimes they'll be right, and sometimes they'll be wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, there's so many good questions. Also, a lot of people discussing least favorite words in the comments. So, question from AJ. This is a particularly popular question with romance writers, and it's a great one.
Okay.
Who would you cast as Rose and Angus in the film adaptation of Curves for Days?
Okay. So I make a comment. When Rose first sees Angus, she makes this smart-ass comment in her own mind, not to him. She says, sort of like Jason Momoa, if Jason weren't such a tiny, dainty little fella.
Yeah.
Something like that, So on the one hand, I did kind of think of Angus as Jason Momoa-ish, but Jason Momoa looks a little more cheerful.
Yeah.
So
it's jolly.
Yes, if you could take Jason Momoa and make him look cranky, that could be Angus.
Yeah.
And I don't really have anybody in mind for Rose. She would have to be small and round and have curly dark hair and big brown eyes. And I think a really expressive face. Does that ring a bell?
I'm gonna give it some thought.
Yeah, but
there's gotta be a good.
That's part of the problem, isn't it? That we don't have this huge cast of available fat actors that we're used to seeing and attaching names to. That would be an issue.
Yeah. Well, everyone, put your thinking hats on. If you watch it, there's a person who'd be good for Rose. Let Laura know. There was another one. Oh, there's someone. I think I lost it. Someone at some point said, "Who is doing the Curves for Days TikTok campaign? And can it be me?" I can't find who said it. Let's get this trending on TikTok.
Well, I am not on TikTok. I have seen
Either way.
some TikToks, including a.
It was AJ.
Okay. Make me a pitch.
Yeah, AJ, get on it. AJ, just become a book influencer right now. And
however one goes about that.
Get it. Yeah. Great. Cool. I think we've devolved into just naming actresses, which is great.
Well, that's good. Well, I do have a really limited pop culture knowledge, so I never know actors and actresses.
Well, you'll get. We can discover a person
yes.
for you. It can be one of those things. And introducing. All right, so let's, in our last few minutes here, another really popular question that we need to address, especially with romance, is tell us what you can about what is coming next from the town of Galway, North Carolina.
Well, you can probably tell that I was seeding July's story.
Yes.
And
yes, for those who have not read it.
Yes, July has been nursing a broken heart for half her life. And she, you can tell from Curves for Days, you can tell that July is a fixture in the town. She's a resource and a powerhouse, and, she's a big part of the heart of the town. And her story is next. And it's a story of her and the young man she fell in love with when they were 16. And they were perfect together. And they were sure they were going to be together forever. And then he disappeared. And she never learned why. And he comes back. And so that book, we have, I think.
I'm sorry, is this a thriller?
No, it is. No. But the title we've settled on, I'm pretty sure this is the final title, is What She's Having. The lovely nod when hearing that, Sally.
Yes.
And it's going to come out, I believe, in April.
Wow, that's great.
So yeah,
well, not too long to wait then, people. So yeah, you heard it here first. Maybe some of you have already read it. There's like very in the know people in the comments.
I begged.
Really
I did some begging.
Congratulations again on your first book, Curves for Days. Those of you who have read it, awesome. Those of you who have not and you don't have a copy yet, if you want to go ahead and buy it from Majors and Quinn, that would be awesome. We'll throw we've had such an active chat here. We'll throw our website right there again, in case you want to head over. If you're in Minneapolis, we have really easy pickup, but we also ship everywhere. So give that a try. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you so much for hosting this, Annie. It was really fun talking to you, and I really appreciate Majors and Quinn offering to do this.
Oh, well, of course. We always love meeting our local authors, and we have a little soft spot for local romance too. And so it's great to have you as part of that team. And we will see you for the next one, I hope.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening and happy reading.